Hey everybody, welcome to the video. It's Thursday, August 12th, and we're breaking down this 8-game day slate that we have over on DraftKings today. The slates are kind of chopped up, very weird. We have games throughout the entire day, but we're going to be mainly focusing on the 8-game day slate that starts around noon, which is very early, so make sure you guys don't forget if you reserve your lineups or reserve your contests to not miss lock today, because it's going to come quite early compared to normal. And if you find this video helpful in any way possible, please leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. And if you want to take that one step further and become an official member over on Patreon, link is down below in the description for that, for all the tools in the Discord community. And last but not least, this video is sponsored by Prize Picks. I'm sure most of you know what it is by now, but if you don't, it's daily fantasy sports simplified, just you versus the projections. There's no sharks, 150 max contests, or salary cap restrictions, or anything like that. Just you versus the props that they offer each and every single day. And as of right now, if you're a new signee over on Prize Picks, you can use code CPENNY to get a free money bonus up to $100. That's an instant deposit match up to $100. If you deposit $100, you get $100 for free. So it's free money. Why not use it to your advantage when you use code CPENNY and tell them I sent you? But I think that's it for the plugs for the most part. So without further ado, let's dive into today's video. As always, we'll start with the pitching, then move on to the bats. And similar to last night's slate, where I said I just want to spend it for like the two most expensive pitchers on the slate with Kevin Gausman and Corbin Burnes, I'm probably going to do that once again tonight with Brandon Woodruff and Chris Bassett. Yes, I realize these guys are expensive. That's $20,200 combined in pitching, which is quite a bit. But like I say, each and every single slate, DraftKings makes it way too easy and way too viable to do this. So we're just going to keep taking advantage of that. Yes, we have John Means here. Yes, we have Marco Gonzalez if you're looking for a super expensive stack today and you have to use a cheap SP2. I think that's fine. But the game plan here is to spend it for Brandon Woodruff and Chris Bassett. Not an absolute must, but I think at least one of those two is certainly something you're going to want to do tonight. And we'll start with Brandon Woodruff here, $10,200. He's the most expensive pitcher on the slate. But I am all about Brandon Woodruff here. I think if you're playing cash games tonight, you don't have him in your lineup, you're probably doing it wrong. I will say, similar to Corbin Burnes last night, the wind is going to be blowing out once again in Wrigley. And if you're brand new to MLB DFS, which I'd be surprised if you were at this point of the season, but if you are, the way the wind blows in Wrigley really dictates how much of a hitter-friendly environment is going to be or pitcher-friendly. Like when it's blowing in, just the way the stadium is built, it's very friendly to pitching, and when it's blowing out, it's going to be a big negative for pitching and a big boost for the bats. But they have to hit the ball first for that to work in their advantage, and the Cubs had a bad time trying to hit the ball versus Corbin Burnes last night. I want to say he had around 50 DraftKings points. I missed the ending part of that game, but he went 8 innings, 99 pitches. Kind of surprised they didn't let him go the full 9, which if he did, he would have been close to 60 DraftKings points. But I think he had 16 strikeouts. I mean, he was awesome all game long. The wind was blowing out, but again, you got to hit the ball first for that to work. And I think we're going to see the same thing here for Brandon Woodruff. Maybe not quite 15 plus strikeouts, but I think he can get you around 25, 30 fantasy points tonight and be worth that expensive price point. Like, yeah, the wind's going to be blowing out here, but this Cubs lineup is absolutely awful right now. They lost Rizzo, they lost Baez, they lost Chris Bryant. Like, they have Rafael Ortega, and that's pretty much about it at this point. So I'm all about Brandon Woodruff here. If I had to guess their implied team total, probably like 3.5, especially after what happened last night. And if we look at his numbers on the season, similar to Corbin Burnes, he has been excellent. He doesn't give much power. He's got a K rate in the 30s, low Sierra, low XFIP, low ERA, less than a 100 ISO given up. He's got a lean to the ground balls. Doesn't give up much hard contact and less than a homer per 9. So I really see nothing to not like about Brandon Woodruff here. Yes, he's expensive, but I think he's by far the best pitching option on today's slate. And then dropping in a Chris Bassett here, $10,000. Don't really love the matchup versus Cleveland. I'm not sure if that's just me being biased because I'm an Indians fan, but they don't really strike out too much. And like I was mentioning, I want to try to double spend it for a pitcher today, but if you can't, we do have some other viable pitching options. I don't think it's like a Bassett or bust kind of day, but he is an overall pretty safe option here. Typically a guy that can score around 20, 25 fantasy points with upside of more. Like, he's not the biggest strikeout pitch in the world, but the guy's just solid enough where he usually gets by each and every single game. I'd prefer if he was at home in Oakland. It's a much better park for pitching than it is in Cleveland. 4.5 implied team total here, but he is a pretty heavy favorite. Do like that Oakland A stack quite a bit tonight. If they could get him to win, that 4-point bonus can always go a long way. And if we're looking at his numbers on the season, pretty good. Not quite Brandon Woodruff. Sierra at XFIP about a run higher, but still a nice 25.2% K rate. Doesn't really walk too many guys. Doesn't give him much power. Just about a homer per 9 and a 27% hard contact rate. This is not a strikeout heavy team in Cleveland, but outside of a few bats, I'm not really overly concerned about rostering pitchers. Like, besides J-Ram, besides Franmil Reyes, I mean, it's not really that great of a lineup. So I think Bassett, even though he's quite expensive, is overall one of the best pitching options on today's slate. Then John Means here, $9,200. He gets a, I guess, relatively good matchup versus Detroit, because if you're looking at their overall season numbers versus lefties, it's actually quite ugly. Like, they have really struggled, especially in the strikeout department, or about a 26.5% K rate. WRC plus below 100, ISO at only 145, but the WOBA is up to 310 and the OBP at 316. And they actually do have some guys that can hit for some pop versus lefties, like Robbie Grossman, Jonathan Scope. Miguel Cabrera is not a power guy at this point of his career, but he is batting around 300 versus lefties. Candelara's got a decent batting average, and Eric Haas has been murdering lefties this year, so I'm not in love with John Means, although I will say about 2 starts ago, he actually faced Detroit, had around 24, 25 fantasy points in that game. Not saying it's going to happen again, but Means is a pretty solid pitcher. I will say ever since he got hurt and came back, he's definitely struggled, because earlier in the season, the guy was fantastic. He had that game where he scored like 50 fantasy points. I believe that's when he had a no-hitter earlier in the season. I forget who that was against. It might have been Texas, which, early in the year, I feel like everyone was getting no-hitters versus Texas, it felt like. But despite the high implied team total, you got to imagine a good chunk of that would probably come against the Baltimore bullpen, and it's a very hitter-friendly park, so there's concerns here. I mean, especially this time of the year, it's usually hot and muggy. We'll have to see where the wind's blowing, but it's a very hitter-friendly park, and the Detroit Tigers have been playing way better baseball than they were earlier in the season, so you got to be a little bit careful. I think this is probably more of a tournament option here, but if we can get like 6+ strikeouts here, a couple runs given up, maybe we get lucky with a win. I don't hate Means in tournaments, but for $800 more, I feel just a lot more safe with Chris Bassett. And I wouldn't even rule out a Detroit stack on today's slate. Like, if you want to roster Means in one lineup, let's say you're playing 3 max, you roster Means in one, and another lineup you roster the Detroit Tigers, and you kind of hedge your bets there. And, both lineups can end up working out. I mean, it just depends on how the bullpen goes for the Orioles today, but I think he's a fine option in tournaments. Now, Marco Gonzalez, $6,700. He's actually strung together some good games recently, and I know I said I want to double spend it for a pitcher, but if you can't do that, you need to spend down. I think Marco Gonzalez might be your guy here. He's below $7,000. You got a low implied team total here at 3.6, pretty heavy favorite. I don't think the Mariners stack's looking that bad tonight versus Fulte, a guy that gives up a lot of hard contact. And if a $6,700 pitcher can get that 4-point bonus, that'll definitely go a long way. Now, his numbers on the year are obviously not very good. I mean, he's got an ERA close to 5, xFIP at 5, Sierra close to 5, K rate below 20%, close to double-digit walk rate, and a 240 ISO given up. But Texas really doesn't have any good bats in the lineup. Like, Adolis Garcia is like the only power that you have to worry about. But even then, a solo shot or two is not going to kill us. Like, if he gives up 2 or 3 runs, but he can get a handful of strikeouts, that's not bad, especially if he can pick up the win. And if you're looking at these splits for the Rangers this season versus lefties, only a 131 team ISO, 81 WRC plus, and a 287 WOBA. But just from a matchup perspective, I think Gonzalez is actually a halfway decent play here, and a very low implied team total. This is actually one of the lowest totals on the slate, and he's only $6,700. So if you need a cheap option, I think he's your guy. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the pitching. So move right over to the bats. The first team I want to talk about, they might not be the most exciting team in baseball, but they're dirt cheap, and they actually draw a very good spot here versus Matt Manning in the same hitter-friendly park. I always talk about other teams when they go to Baltimore. Well, the Orioles play in the same exact park, so they're just not that exciting, but it's a great spot here versus Matt Manning. And the Orioles team is actually, I actually like some of these guys. Like, Cedric Mullins is good, Trey Mancini is good, Anthony Santander's been hot recently. He homered last night. He had a double dunk performance the night before that. He is pretty much free. Austin Hayes has power in his bat. DJ Stewart. Like, this is not a terrible lineup. I mean, I prefer them versus lefties, but if we look at Matt Manning's splits this season, this is definitely a pitcher we can pick on. Plus, the Detroit bullpen's obviously nothing too great there. But on the year, Matt Manning, about a 6.5 ERA, and xFIP well north of 5, only 11.9% K rate, giving up a 164 ISO, which is not terrible, but a 36% hard contact rate, and about a homer per 9, which is not bad. But, I mean, you could use pretty much anybody here versus Matt Manning. The guy's not a great pitcher, a low K rate. He's going to give you pitches to hit, and they have a team total close to 6 today, and this is one of the best places to hit in all of baseball. So besides Cedric Mullins and Trey Mancini, these guys are dirt cheap. So if you want to do an expensive stack tonight, just pick a couple Orioles guys, because, they're pretty much free. Like Urias is only 3K, Santander's below 3K, as is Austin Hayes, DJ Stewart, Miguel Franco, Pedro Severino is a little bit pricey relative to the other guys here, but, I mean, all these guys are in play. But the top half of that order, I think, is certainly viable tonight in all formats. Now, definitely looking to stack the Orioles with one of the highest implied team totals on the slate, and they're one of the cheapest overall teams as well. Point per otherwise on my top stack stool, they are looking very, very good, pretty much the top of the list tonight. And the next team I want to talk about here is the Milwaukee Brewers in a halfway decent spot versus Kyle Hendricks. Kyle Hendricks is not a bad pitcher, but he's a very boring and annoying pitcher because he doesn't really have a high strikeout rate, but he doesn't typically get blown up too much as well. Like, he's good at limiting the damage, but I do like this spot quite a bit for Milwaukee. Looks like the wind's going to be blowing out once again. The weather should be pretty solid for hitting, so I like the hitting environment. And the Brewers got off to a very hot start yesterday. They scored 7 runs in the first inning, and I believe they only ended the game with 8 or 9 runs. So they kind of did nothing after that besides Omar Narvaez, I believe, in the 9th inning when he hit I forget if it was a solo shot or not, but I know he went deep. And, this team is just, they should have a team total north of 5 today would be my guess, maybe like around 5.5, which looks pretty good. It's not the most expensive lineup, but it's not the cheapest lineup either because guys like Adames, Yelich, and Escobar are very expensive. But I love Colton Wong leading off here. I think he's one of the best players at second base today, just dirt cheap. He's actually been hitting very, very well all season long. He has shown some pop, and he has a good batting average, and he hits very well versus righties. Willie Adames, ever since he moved to Milwaukee, the guy has been one of the best shortstops in baseball. Like, he is absolutely killing it. Christian Yelich has been awful for a couple of seasons now, but he actually did something last night, and just profiling versus righties over the course of his career, I think he's an overall pretty solid play. Raw points-wise, going to look like one of the top plays on the slate. Eduardo Escobar, he's hit for power this year. Omar Narvaez is very good versus right-handed pitching. The rest of these guys kind of lineup fillers, maybe besides Rowdy Tellez, so I could see gaining ownership at only $3,300 left and righty matchup there. But the Brewers, while Kyle Hendricks isn't the guy I typically try to pick on the most, there's not many options on this slate that really stick out to me too much, but the Brewers do look pretty good, especially if they were going to have some hitter-friendly conditions in Chicago once again tonight. And then moving on to our next stack, we have the Oakland A's versus Eli Morgan, who I think will be decent down the road. But if we're looking at his splits on the season, he is giving up a ton of power this year. Like, I think, an ISO above 300 at 303. The K rate's not terrible, around 24%, but an ERA above 6. XFIP's a little bit better at 4.6, but still giving up a 55% fly ball rate, 39% hard contact rate, and about 2.5 homers per 9. Versus lefties giving up a 283 ISO, and righties a 323 ISO with a better K rate. But we can use pretty much anybody in this lineup. It's a nice park shift going from Oakland to Cleveland. They're on the road, so you get those guaranteed at bats. They have a team total north of 5.5 today. All these guys are pretty much in play. Mark Canha can hit righties or lefties well. Starling Marte, a good addition to that team from Miami. He's very expensive though, nearly $6,000. I'm not sure why he's that expensive. The guy's obviously a great bat, batting .310 on the season, but just seems a bit steep for me. If you're full stack in the team, you're probably going to have to use a guy like Marco Gonzalez as your SP2, but I like pretty much all these guys. Matt Olson's one of the top overall plays on the slate, in my opinion. This is one of the top home run calls, 295 ISO in the season with a 280 batting average. He crushes righties. He actually crushes lefties as well, but I mean, Eli Morgan's giving up a lot of power versus lefties and righties this season, but love Matt Olson, Jed Lowry, Josh Harrison, Sean Murphy. Like, all these guys are in play for me, and maybe not the best point per dollar stack today, but they do look really good overall. Now, last stack I want to talk about here is the Detroit Tigers. I know I talked up John Means, but at the same time, I still think we could use some Tigers here. Maybe not a full-on stack, but I think a mini stack is certainly in play because some of these guys do hit lefties actually decently well. And if we look at John Means' numbers in the season, he's not a bad pitcher, but if we look at his splits versus righties, he's given up close to a 200 ISO. That comes with a 25% K rate and only a 3.2 ERA and a 4.25 XFIP, and only a 28% hard contact rate, but a 50% fly ball rate and close to 2 homers per 9. So if you want to look for some cheap homers here, a guy like Robbie Grossman, Jonathan Scope's not really that cheap, or maybe just not even some cheap homers. If you're just looking for some one-off homers or just a mini stack, I mean, some of these guys versus lefties are actually pretty good. Robbie Grossman over a 200 ISO, Scope a 267 ISO. Candelario, not a big power guy, but he's batting 294 versus lefties. Miggy 304. Eric Haas batting 313 with a 400 ISO on the season, with a near 50% fly ball rate and a 40% hard contact rate. Nico Goodrum's been always a good batting average guy versus lefties. Zach Short, Willie Castro, Victor Reyes. Like, it's pretty much all righties in this lineup. There's not one lefty, considering since Kilbadu got injured that one game. We have a full-on righty lineup here, so I do have some concerns with John Means, and I think a couple of these guys could take him deep, especially in one of the best hitting parks in baseball. But you don't have to full-on stack these guys, but I think a mini stack or one-offs are certainly in order, and they do have a team total of 5.2 today, and even then they could do damage versus the bullpen as well. But with that being said, I think that'll be it for the video. So I hope it was helpful, and if it was, make sure to leave a like, subscribe to the channel if you haven't yet already. And if you want to take that one step further, become an official member over on Patreon, get access to all the extra content. I do cover other sports as well. Link is down below in the description for that. And don't forget, this video was sponsored by Prize Picks. It's just you versus the projections. And as of right now, if you want to get a free money bonus up to $100, use code CPEN and tell them I sent you to either prizepicks.com or you can use a link down below. But I think that'll be pretty much it. I will stop rambling, and I'll see you guys on Friday for the next video.